Hi, I'm Albert Hammond and you're watching The Henry Wheeler Show.
So, this happened. On Friday the 25th of September, I went to see Albert Hammond at my college, which is a really strange thing thinking about it. It was very poorly promoted. I only found out about it because someone in my class had tagged me in a post relating to it. He was doing a kind of songwriting seminar. As a songwriter, I thought it might give me some insight into the music industry and being a professional songwriter and trying to get yourself out there and techniques and what have you. And it's funny, I was going to take a bus down to Weston-super-Mare, which is a long way away, to go to Banksy's Dismal Land, his amusement park, where that night Kate Tempest, Pussy Riot and Massive Attack were performing. But I couldn't go because I had other things that I needed to do the next day, which prevented me from doing that, which meant that I could go to this seminar that Albert Hammond was doing. I'm kind of glad that I didn't go because I wouldn't have got to experience this really unique event that not many people, I don't think, will get the chance to see. So I feel very fortunate. Indeed. Continuity. I didn't really know what to expect from this because I didn't know if he was going to be sitting around and then we'd just ask him questions and then he would just fire back with his responses or what. But it was labelled as an hour and a half long, so there must have been something a bit more substantial than that. And there was. He had his whole band there. He had the whole auditorium set up with every single member of his band, and they just performed song after song retrospectively from his career. And each song he would precede it with a story about how the song was written and how it came to be. Just before the first song he talked about his first visit to LA, and he saw a beautiful cloud of smoke across the Hollywood Hills, and he asked the driver what it was, and he replied, "Pollution." And then he played a song called Down by the River, which he believed to be the first evergreen song ever written. I'm not that familiar with Albert Hammond, to be honest. I'm more familiar with his son's work. But I was really impressed by his lyrics in a lot of the songs. It's really clear that he is a genuinely great artist. And I kind of went along just out of curiosity, and I was really surprised by just how good some of the songs are, and just how many songs that he's written which I had no idea he had any involvement with. And then he talked about going to St. Louis and meeting this beautiful woman, and he wrote a song about her because his beauty inspired him. There was just song after song after song about him working with other people, talking about working with Roy Orbison! And then he talked about working with Joe Cocker, who he'd written a song for, and then said, "Come into the studio, you know, I've got a song for you."
And I said, "Why don't you come down and sing?" So he did. He came down and he got on mic and he started to sing. He sang the first line and then he stopped and he looked at me and he said, "Albert, I'm hungry. I'm going to go get some ribs." I said, "Okay, Joe, no problem." So off he went to get some ribs, and I waited and waited, and he never came back. 4 a.m, I was there, and no joke.
Just the imagery of some of his stories are just... And then he was talking about his first ever hit, or his first song that was ever released, Little Arrows, which he wrote for an artist of which I can't actually remember the name of. Just talking about while he was working in a kitchen in a restaurant, the song came on, and he went, "Oh, this is my song." And they went, "Yeah, of course, Albert, washing dishes. Well, of course it's your song." Then apparently it was 9 months until his next hit, and after that the hits just kept coming. And he was going through his back catalogue, just covering as many bases as possible. And then he talked about people doing covers of his songs, which led to him getting more revenue as a songwriter. Aswad covered one of his songs, and then Ace of Base covered it a few decades later. And then Neil Diamond also covered it, and he worked on the song with Albert Hammond.
But I won't let you know.
And they got a choir of children out. It was lovely. He's such a lovely guy. He positively lovely. It was after this that he stopped, and we got to the crux of essentially what I assumed was going to be happening. The microphone was being passed around the audience, and lots of people were asking interesting questions. There was one person in particular who said that they were working on covering some of his songs for a project. They'd been assigned to do that. They'd noticed that he had a co-writing credit on Creep, and he wanted them to explain it, and he explained it to us all.
And they were on doing a radio show on the BBC. I wasn't even here, I was in America, but apparently the publisher of the song was listening to the radio, and they said, you know, we took a lot of the song from The Air That I Breathe because that's one of our favorite songs. And so the publisher called up the management and said, you know, the song sounds like The Air That I Breathe, so we want, you know, a piece of the song. So when that happens, then it's one of those things, you know, that happens, you know. But I didn't write Creep. I wrote The Air That I Breathe. So.
And after this, he was asked how to get a song to an artist, and explained that it's more difficult nowadays. Back then, you'd just knock on people's doors with a guitar and say, look, I've got a song, do you want to hear it? And they'll be like, okay. They'll open the door, you play it, and then they either like it or they don't. But nowadays, it's much more complicated. And he was saying that Debbie Harry recently contacted him to ask if he would do some work on the new Blondie album. And Debbie Harry, like, this guy just constantly was impressing me. Just, you know, I didn't realise he worked with so many people that I like. And then it got to a point where I thought, maybe I should ask a question. I asked him if he felt embarrassed about any of his old work, as I do with mine, musically, and whether he's ever disowned any old material. And he just said, just redo it. Re-release it. You can do that nowadays. I listen back to ideas on a dictaphone and I think, oh, this is actually quite good, and I just look back on it and I elaborate on the idea, and then you got a song. I never really thought about it like that, and I was quite intrigued. So yeah, I might re-record some of my rubbish old albums and re-release them. Not that anyone's even heard of them, except my parents, probably. Oh well. And then someone asked him who he would most love to work with. He said that all of his heroes he had worked with, except Elvis, he's worked with Diana Ross and Willie Nelson, but he's never got to work with. Although he did say that he would love to try and work with Paul McCartney. And to be honest, I see a really big influence of Paul McCartney on his singing. He sounds very much like Paul McCartney in the way that he sings, and that was something that I picked up right from the off. And then when he said that, I kind of thought, yeah, it's quite obvious. It's quite obvious you like the Carts. No one calls him that. Why did I say that? He went on to say that he's bilingual, and as a result has had two careers. One in English and one in Espanol. He was talking about how he was trying to make it as an artist in Madrid, because obviously he was raised in Gibraltar, so the nearest big capital city was Madrid. Talking about a point where he was living on the street, and then his cousin saw him and said, look, I'm going to tell your dad that you're here. And he said, no, please don't tell me that. From this kind of sleeping rough and trying to make ends meet, he wrote It Never Rains in Southern California. He didn't really want to say that it never rains in southern Madrid, because no one would really listen to that, and I kind of agree. It's not a very snappy title. Then he talked about working with Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash. Like, wow. So Johnny Cash, he walked up to him and said, you want to write a song for me? He said, you can come to Nashville and I'll cook for you. And he did. And the only thing he could cook was chili con carne. So all they had the whole time was chili con carne for a week. Jeez. And after this, he talked about falling for a Scottish girl, and her father was not approving of it. He was part of the military, driving trucks at the time, and ended up marrying her. And he is a very, very, very competent lyricist. But to say he's competent as a songwriter, it's just undermining just how good he is. He performed One Moment in Time, which he wrote for Elvis. He wrote it with Elvis in mind, even though he was dead. can understand that, sort of. But in the end, it went to Whitney Houston. It became the Olympic song for soul in 1988, I think. I'm not even going to bother fact-checking that.
I've lived to be the very best. I want it all, no time for less. I've laid the plans, now lay the chance here in my hands. One moment in time.
And then afterwards, he just said, you could do this for the rest of your life and never make it. But so what? Because you're doing something that you love. It's not necessarily positive, but regardless, it doesn't matter if you don't make it, because you're doing something wonderful that you love. And then he was about to play a song and said this was nominated for a Grammy, an Oscar and a Golden Globe. It didn't win anything though. And then he played Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now by Starship, which isn't... I don't like the original song, but I liked his version. It has that horrible 80s sound to it that a lot of pop music has, and no. Ugh. And then he performed It Never Rains in Southern California.
Seems it never rains in Southern California.
And that was it. I mean, it was great. He was supposed to play for an hour and a half, and he ended up playing for 2.5 hours. I'm not complaining, because I loved it. I loved it to pieces. I had a joyous time watching him perform and hearing his stories. It was just a lovely way to spend an afternoon. It really was. But the best part of the whole gig was when I met him backstage. I asked him about criticism, and he said that, you know, everyone hated It Never Rains in Southern California, and he just tucked it away and never played it again. And it wasn't until 4 years after he disowned the song that he was performing songs for an executive, and they asked if he had any others after he played everything that he had, and he played It Never Rains in Southern California, and that was it. They picked it up. I told him, you know, it's been my ambition to be an artist for so long, and before I wanted to be an artist, you know, my my career trajectory, prospects and ideas kept changing, from doctor to policeman to, I don't know, probably a pilot at one point. And I told him when I was 11 years old, I purchased my first ever album, Nevermind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols. Ever since, I've wanted to be a musician. And for 10 years, my opinion hasn't changed at all. And he just said, just keep working at it. It'll work out. Just keep working at it. And I'm just so happy that I decided to go. I really am. Because as I hoped it would, it gave me a great insight into working with other people and just how easy it is. All you got to do is just contact them and hope that they get back to you, or you're there at that moment and you show them some of your work and they go, okay, let's work together. Being in a situation like that before, where I've been talking to an artist which I admire to such a huge extent, it's just such a wonderful moment. I really hope more of those moments occur in my life. Check out Albert Hammond's back catalogue, because some of it is really impressive. I'll get back to you all at some point soon, I hope. I've been wanting to do more frequent videos, but I haven't been able to because my computer's just been faffing about. As a result, I've not been able to get anything done. So just bear with me, please, please, please. No one cares anyway. But, you know, either way, I'm going to try and put up material more frequently. Have a lovely day. Be kind to someone today. There are homeless people on the street that need food and love. Just go and talk to someone and make them feel better. Bye.
Would you come down, have some lunch? You know, I love that. I sort of, you know, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. She wants me to sing. Stop talking and sing. You know?